Today we are talking about percents, fractions, and decimals.
You go to clouds first.
Okay, I'm going to wait till I know I have everybody's attention. Okay. At the very top, there's a star. And it says, remember place values. The reason why we started with place value and spent so much time on place value is because place value is like the foundation for all math. You have to have a strong understanding of place value so that you understand everything moving forward. So we're just going to jot down what we have here. It's just tens. Ooh, that looks weird. Ones, tenths, and hundredths. We know that places continue to go further to the left and further to the right, but we're just going to do that for now. Any number written to the hundredths place can also be written as a percent. The cool thing about percents is percents are always out of 100, always. But can you have more than 100%?
Yeah.
You can. Yeah, because that would be like more than one whole. So if you had like 2 wholes, that would be 200%. Okay? So we're going to be working with equivalent fractions, decimals, and percents today. So we have an example here. It says 45 hundredths. How do I write that as a fraction? 45 over 100. It's also 45%. And we use this symbol for percent. Okay, we have an example problem, and we're going to write the fraction that's given to us as a fraction, as a decimal, and as a percent. So it says 84 out of 200 chickens on the farm laid eggs. What percent laid eggs? Write our answer as a fraction, a decimal, and a percent. Okay, so my fraction is going to be 84 over, ooh, actually no it's not, 200. Fractions should be simplified. We did that last week. The reason we simplified fractions because I wanted you to be prepared moving forward, so like today. What is the greatest common factor that I could simplify 84 and 200 both by?
4. 2.
I could do 2. Okay, let's look at 2. Let's look at 2 because if I do 2, that's going to be 42 hundredths. And that's going to make it really easy to work with percents here in a minute. Okay, could I reduce that further though?
Yes.
I could. What could I reduce it to?
4s.
I could reduce it again by 2 again. Okay, no, I couldn't do 4 now. It would be my GCF would be 4, right? So if I did it by 2 again, then yes, I could have initially reduced it by 4. So if I reduce that again, what would it be? 21 over 50. Okay. Okay.
Some 2s?
So
No, 4.
you could divide it by 4 if you were to do the GCF. But you can always divide by 2 and then reduce it again and reduce it again. Just keep reducing.
Are you
okay?
recording? So do we do 4s? Do we just put 4 and then 20?
Just do just what I do. You write what I write. All right. We're going to shade the model to represent what that shows. So the fact that we kept it as 42 hundredths is great because what kind of model do I have below? I have a hundredths grid. So I'm going to shade 42 of these little bitty squares. So 4 columns plus 2 extra squares down here. Okay. All right. Now, let's skip the decimal for a second and jump over to my percent. All right, so I know that my original problem is 84 out of 200.
This is Watson.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you help Luke better pack up and come to be checked out, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
By you.
You have 84 over 200. And I'm going to reduce it so that my percent is out of 100. So I want 100 to be on the bottom here.
42 of 100. It's
Oh,
something wrong.
we don't have an assignment. It's just the notes today. So
So will I just get on Google Classroom?
okay, so we already know that it's going to be 42 because I reduced by 2s. And 42 out of 100 is the same as
42%.
42% because percents are always out of 100. Okay, to get the decimal version, you can always divide to get a decimal. So if it's 84 out of 200, looking at my fraction here, the fraction bar is actually showing division. So a fraction is a division problem. So I'm going to do 84 divided by 200. And I don't want you to think that you can't do that because you can't. In order to do that, you have to add a decimal and its best friend 0. I know 200 goes into 84 0 times, but now I have created a different number for me to continue to divide into. By adding a decimal and a 0, I can now continue the division. 200 goes into 840 how many times?
82 4.
4 times. What is 200 times 4?
800.
800. I follow the same steps for long division as I usually do, but I cannot have remainders. So what do I do again? Not another decimal. I can only have one decimal. I just add a 0. Bring it down. That 40 turns into 400. How many times can 200 go into 400?
Twice.
2 times. So notice that my decimal is similar to my fraction because I read this as 42 hundredths. It's the same as my fraction and it's the same as 42%.
Wait, so if you're stuck at a remainder, you can just add a 0 and then you won't have a remainder?
If there's already a decimal, then you just add a 0. If there's not a decimal, you have to add a decimal and a 0.
How'd you put a 2?
Okay.
How'd you get a 2?
Because 200 goes into 400 2 times. Okay, let's look at another example. That yellow sheet I gave you has really common percents, fractions, and decimals. The only thing I don't like about that yellow sheet is that, for example, 1/8 says that 0 and 1300ths is equivalent. Well, we have an exact number that we were about to find out, so you can change that on your yellow sheet. They rounded it. They rounded to the hundredths place on that yellow cheat sheet, okay?
It's actually
All right.
0.125.
Correct. So what we're about to do right now is we are going to divide 1/8. If it said, I want you to convert 1/8 to a percent, this is a fraction, which is a division problem. It means 1 divided by 8. So what I used to tell my students all the time is box the top, then you know what to divide by. So the 1's going to go in the box, the 8 goes outside the box, okay? You're going to question yourself at the beginning because you're going to feel like you're setting it up wrong because it looks weird. Typically, we put the bigger number inside the box. But now that we know that we can extend it by adding a decimal and a 0, it's like a whole new world. The thing you have to remember is if you have a decimal in the dividend, you have to pop it to the top in the quotient. Before you do anything, pop it to the top. Okay, 8 goes into 10 once. 8 times 1 is 8. I have that remainder, which I cannot leave. I can't put 1/10 remainder 2. It doesn't work like that anymore. I add another 0 and drop it down. 8 goes into 20 2 times. 8 times 2 is 16. I have a remainder of 4 again. So I'll add another 0 and drop it down. And 8 goes into 40. 5 times, which is exactly 40,
You keep going down
until you end up with 0. Sometimes you have repeating decimals. We'll see examples of that when we get more into dividing with decimals, but for now, we're going to keep it simple. We're done here. Okay?
1.
Well, this is not a percent, right? That is a decimal. So 1/8 is equal to 0.125.
And the decimal is
This is, I want to show you how the math works. So this is 125 thousandths, right, as a fraction. If I were to write that as a fraction, it looks like this. Thinking back to my place value chart, when I am moving up and down the place value chart, think about the metric system too. It's all based on a base 10 system. So if percents have to be out of what? 100, right? Percents have to be out of 100. So I know that whatever I put right here has to be out of 100. Well, how do I get from 1,000 to 100, Eli? How do I get from 1,000 to 100? What do? I divide by something. I divide by 10. So if I did this, that would make it 12.5, and 12.5 is my percent. Now we're gonna spend a lot of time on this. This is not it for today. This is the first time you're doing this, and it can be a lot and it can be confusing. We are spending quite a bit of time on this. So it's not today, okay, here you go, you gotta know it. That's not what I'm expecting, okay? We're gonna spend a lot of time on this. We're gonna skip the guided practice for now. And all right, today we are gonna go back a page and you are going to work on the guided practice with your table, and then we will check it when you are done.
I was wondering about that yesterday.
All right, looking at number 1, it says a farmer watered 3/7 of a field. What percentage is equivalent to that fraction that he watered? So if you do the method box the top and divide, you would box in the 3, divide by 7, and your decimal is a really long decimal. It keeps it just goes for a while. Okay? It goes for a while. So you have 4 options to choose from. If you don't move the decimal enough places, that's why DP is important. 2 letters, 2 places, left to right. So I'm going to move that decimal 2 places. You can see it in red. I move that decimal over and it ends up between the 2 and the 8. You can see that B is the one that matches up to that. Any questions on number 1? Did we do okay on that one?
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Number 2 says a company spent 36% of its annual budget developing a new bicycle. What fraction of the company's budget was spent? So equivalent, fraction, and percent. Percents are always out of 100, so I write 36 hundredths. Then I simplify it because I don't see that as an answer choice, and then I know that D is the correct answer for number 2.
Can you scroll down?
I'm about to. Number 3 says a meteorologist at a television station reported that a town received 90 hundredths inches of rain. What fraction is equivalent to that? So I'm going to write 90 over 100 as a fraction, simplify it down to 9/10. And I'm looking for equivalent fractions to 9/10. And I can see that C would be the same as 9/10, because if I multiply the top and bottom both by 2, I would end up with 18/20. And then the last one, number 4, a craft store offered sewing classes on 12 of the 30. So 12 30ths. I simplified it first, all the way down to 2/5.
Please excuse interruption.
Okay, so I simplified it down first to 2/5. Then I know, and you should know, and if you don't, it's on that yellow cheat sheet, that 2/5 is equal to 4/10 as a decimal. But if you're not sure how to do that, you can always do a fraction, like equivalent fraction. or you can box the top and divide. Okay? Are there any questions? All right. We are going to need our Chromebooks. You're going to need a partner. I will partner you up today, so please wait for your assignment. That next page, if you open it up, we're going to focus on 3 things today. We're going to pause on the fraction 2% because it's a lot of steps like you just saw. We're going to focus on 2 pretty simple ones. Decimal to percent and percent to decimal first.
Question,
Okay.
is it like this or like this? Like on this? Is it this?
Doesn't matter.
Oh, okay.
Okay. There is a strategy that I like to use because I love Dr. Pepper.
Yes.
So I call it the DP strategy. If you notice, I'm waiting for all of the conversations to stop, please. I know y'all are excited about Dr. Pepper because it is so good. But please notice the letters of DP have something to do with math, not just Dr. Pepper. It is good, but it also means decimal and percent. So if I write DP on my paper, I can see that to go from a decimal to a percent, I move which direction? From decimal to percent. Left to right. Okay, 2 places. Notice how I have 2 letters. How many, or what is a percent out of all the time?
100.
Percents are out of 100. So if I had to move, think about our base 10 system and our place value chart up here on the wall. Each time I move 1 place, it's times 10. If I move 2 places, it's times another 10. 10 times 10 is what? 100. Percents are always out of 100. So base 10 system is super cool. Percents are super cool because it all goes hand in hand. So we're going to look at some examples, but before we do, I want to make a note that to change decimals to percents, we move decimal 2 places to right. To go from decimal to percent, look at DP. I go left to right to get from D to P. There are 2 letters, 2 places. We're going to practice this. I'm going to make this really big right here so that we can just focus here. Okay. For number 1, I have 3 and 5/10. To make that decimal into a percent, I'm going to move this decimal 2 places to the right. What do you think I fill in that gap?
0.
A 0. So it becomes 350%. So 3 and 5/10. It's more than 1 whole because it's got 3 wholes and 5 and half of another. So it's 350%. If it's just 9, I don't have a decimal. Where do you think I might start my decimal? At the back. And move it 1, 2 places to the right. So it's 900%.
Can we do the rest for ourselves?
You can, and you can just check them with me. For 7,800ths, move that decimal 2 places to the right. So it is 78%. We know that 100% is 1 whole. 78% is less than a whole. It's 7,800ths. Okay, number 4. 1, 2 places to the right. That is 9%. Number 5, 2 places to the right. It is 0.2%. It's tiny. But still greater than 1. Is it? It's not, because 2% is equivalent to 2,000ths, which is less than 1 but greater than 0. All right, the next one. 2 places to the right, that's going to be 407%. Okay, changing a decimal to a percent is as simple as moving the decimal 2 places to the right. Okay? Well, what do you think about percents to decimals? If I use the DP strategy. Yeah, I go to the left. So move decimal 2 places to the left. So if I have 95%, where do you think I start the decimal since I don't have one in that number? Blakely said it earlier. At the back. So go back 1, 2 places. So it is 95 hundredths. I thought you did earlier. Came from over there somewhere. Okay, this time I have a decimal already. My rule stays the same. I move it 1, 2 places. 0 the hero. So it's, anybody know how to read that number?
5/55 out of 100.
555 10 thousandths. What's 100%?
Don't even have 10
1.
on that.
You can do 1.0 if you want, but it's just 1. Number 4, I start at the back and move it 2 places to the left. So 750% is the same as
700
7 and a half. 7 and 5/10. 2% milk is not the same as whole milk. It's less than whole. 1, 2 places to the left. It's 200ths. Guys, be so careful. Okay, the last one, 2 places to the left, makes that 3 thousandths. Okay, decimal to percent, percent to decimal. Those are the easier ones because it's as simple as moving your decimal to the right or to the left. You just have to remember DP. Okay, to get from percent to decimal, I move left. To get from decimal to percent, move right. Okay, kind of a shortcut.
That's percents to fractions.
We are only doing one section over here. We are not doing converting fractions to percents. We are going to do the top part, converting percents to fractions. Because we know that percents are always out of 100. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to write the percent as a fraction over 100. So number 1 would just be 625 over 100. But can I leave it like that? No, I need to fix that because that is an improper fraction. I want to make that improper fraction into a mixed number. So how many whole times can 100 go into 625? 6, and I would have 25 hundredths left over, but I should simplify that so it is 6 1/4.
Oh, are you videoing this? Oh.
I
watch.
Percents are always out of 100, so 8 over 100, which is 2 25ths. Number 3, percents are always out of what?
100.
Percents are always out of what?
100.
So how do I write it?
15 over 100.
Exactly, and then simplify.
1, 2, 3. Easiest one.
And then the last one, percents are always out of,
100.
so I write 450 over 100, and I fix it, and it should be 4 1/2. Y'all, we're going to spend the rest of the week on this. Lots of activities,
Thank you.
lots of different
Don't
things
get this
to
at all.
really get the hang of it.
I don't get it.
Fractions, decimals, percents. Oh my.
I'm sorry.
Decimals, percents. Oh my. We're going to finish this tomorrow. So go ahead and close it up and y'all can put that away.
Yay, we're going to be on your YouTube.
Okay.
And I live at Castro Park Court. No, I don't know.
All right.
That's a random address.
We are going to finish our notes that we started yesterday on converting decimals, fractions, and percent. So just reviewing, when we change a decimal to a percent, I taught you guys about my favorite drink, Dr. Pepper.
Yeah.
Or DP for decimal percent.
Or
Okay?
DP for DP.
So DP is a good visual to remind you that to go from a decimal to a percent, you go left to right, and there are two letters which remind you to go two places. Okay? To go percent to decimal, you're still using the DP method, but you're going from percent to decimal from right to left. Again, there's two letters to remind you to move two places. Okay, coming up here, we talked about changing percents to fractions. We talked about how percents are always out of 100. So whatever your percent is, you're going to write it as a fraction over 100 every single time. And then you just have to notice, okay, well, is it a regular fraction? Is it an improper fraction? Because if it's improper, we then have to fix it and change it to a what?
Normal.
A mixed number, okay? We also need to remember to always simplify our fractions from this point forward. Moving on, we always reduce our fractions, always, okay? All right, so moving on to fractions. We have 4 big steps. They are all important. Your reminders at the top, do not forget, percents are always out of 100. Okay. So step 1 says, first I need to change any mixed numbers to improper fractions. Okay, so looking at number 1, I'm going to change that mixed number to an improper fraction. Do y'all remember how to do that? I start at the bottom. I multiply the denominator by the whole number. So that's going to be 32, and then I add the numerator. So my mixed number should be 33 fourths. My numerator will be 33. Sam, you can come back to your table. You're right up front. So come on back up here. Come sit right here. Okay. Number 2, if I'm changing mixed numbers to improper fractions, just practicing this first. 4 times 2 is 8, plus 3 is 11. Do I have any other mixed numbers that I need to change?
No.
Okay. All right, so let's go back to number 1 and let's move down to step 2. It says set the fraction up equal to another fraction out of 100. Well, we've talked about equivalent fractions not long ago. So I'm going to write this fraction, 33 fourths, equal to another fraction out of 100. But I don't know what that top number is going to be. Bless you. Okay, how do I figure out that numerator? What would I do? Hunter, what do you think? Multiply what? How am I getting from 4 to 100? What do I multiply 4 by to get 100?
25.
25. So I got to do the same thing to the top number. So I would do 33 times 25. And that would give me my percent. So over here off to the side, I'm going to work that out. Do I always do it by 25?
It's 4. Doesn't it?
It just depends on, it depends on my fraction that I'm changing to a percent. We'll talk about it. There's a different way to do it. Okay, so this is going to be my fraction, but is that my answer? Because what am I trying to do?
Out of 100.
I'm going to simplify it, okay?
25.
So, I'm not going to simplify it. Sorry, no. I'm repeating what I heard. All right, guys, Step 4. So we just did step 3. It says to either scale or cross multiply and divide, okay? So we scaled it. We were able to identify that we are increasing it by 25 to get to 100. So we did 33 times 25 to get 825. Percents are out of what?
100.
So the numerator is my percent. So number 1, 8 1/4 is 825%. Okay, the next one, I have 11/4. I already fixed it and wrote it as an improper fraction. If there is side conversations, please end them. That way everybody around you can hear and focus. We only have 3 more examples. Okay, so if I have 2 3/4, I fix it and I make it an improper fraction so that I can scale it again. So I'm going to write that down here. I have 11/4. I want to make it out of 100 because percents are always out of 100. And what do I multiply by 4 to get 100? These are just, this is equivalent fractions. I'm making an equivalent fraction at this point. So I'm going to multiply it by 25, which means I got to multiply the top by 25 to keep it equivalent. So 25 times 11 is 275. So what is my percentage? Correct.
I know an easier way to do it. So look at the 2 and then 3/4 is 75.
All right. For number 3, we have 6. 6 is a whole number. But that's not a fraction. I thought I was supposed to be converting fractions to percents.
It's 6/1.
6/1, okay.
That is facts.
So if I put 6/1 and I am trying to get this to be out of 100, what am I multiplying 1 by to get 100? 100.
That's what I said.
Which means I've got to do the same thing to the top. So 6 times 100 means that 6 is equal to 600%. The last one is 1/5. So I just get to set it up straight out of 100.
Yeah.
What do I multiply 5 by to get 100?
Why did you shut the door?
20. So I'm going to multiply this denominator by 20. Do the same thing to the numerator. So it's 20 over 100. So what is my percent? 20%. Those are pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but what if I gave you one that looks like this? I'm going to move down to the bottom of my page a little bit. You've got notebook paper space in your journal that you can write on too. So anywhere off to the side, underneath. But I need everybody's attention. Okay, what if I gave you one that looks like this? Okay, so 7/8. I'm making number 5 right here. And we're going to do 7/8. Okay, if I try, don't write this part, but if I try to make it out of 100, 8 does not evenly go into 100.
Oh, and
Okay.
by 12.
So here's another way that you can do it. You can, this is what I call box the top and divide. We're going to change it to a decimal, then make that decimal into a percent. Okay, so it's a 2-step process. First, I'm going to make my fraction into an equivalent decimal by dividing, because a fraction is a division problem. So 7 divided by 8. I'm going to work that out right here. 8 goes into 7 0 times, so I add my BFFs, decimal and 0, pop that decimal to the top. 8 goes into 70 8 times, which is 64. This is just basic division right now. That's all I'm doing. I add a 0 so I can keep dividing. Goes into 67 times, and 8 times 7 is 56. I have 4 left over, but I got to keep dividing.
What?
So I add another 0, that becomes 40, and 8 goes into 40 5 times. Okay, now my equivalent decimal is 0.875. That is a decimal. Okay, 875 thousandths. How do I change a decimal to a percent? What's my rule? Look in the top left of your notes. DP. Decimal to percent means I move from left to right 2 places, so my percent is 87.5%. Box the top and divide. Okay, that's just an example of one that doesn't evenly go into 100, that I can't evenly make out of 100. Okay.